Hey everyone, I'm Wes Hillscamp and this is Scamp's Automotive. I fix cars and just about anything else that people will let me get my hands on. So today I'm working on a 1998 Dodge Ram 1500. Problem is the thing keeps overheating. It took some front end damage, bust a hole in the radiator. The customer had his brother's buddy help him replace the radiator. Makes me kind of nervous already. And after they replaced it, it kept overheating. So let me show you what I found. So first of all, I pressure tested the cooling system and I could hear air escaping from this little metal pipe down here. On the end of this metal pipe, you can unbolt it right there and pull it out, and there's just an O-ring on the end of it that seals it up. Sure enough, that half the O-ring was gone. So put a new O-ring on, tried out the pressure. It was holding pressure. I'm like, cool, that must have been it. The cooling system looked pretty dirty, so I was kind of wary about that, but I didn't think, it would be bad enough to cause it to overheat. So we go start driving it. Within about 10 minutes, gauge starts to spike. And I'm like, oh shoot, what must have happened is air got sucked in through that little hole that was down there, and now there's a bunch of air in the system, so I just need to bleed it out. So I attempt to bleed it. I notice that the upper hose here is burning hot, which is a good sign because the thermostat is right underneath this hose. That's where it attaches to. So as the thermostat opens, the hot coolant comes off the engine block and is supposed to flow into the radiator. Well, this hose is super hot, and this lower radiator hose is ice cold. It's as cold as ambient temperature. So that tells me automatically we have no flow going through our radiator, which is really weird because the radiator is brand new. I'm like, well, maybe the coolant isn't so nasty it already clogged it up. And you can also put your hand right in front of here when it's blowing. When that fan is spinning, that air should be very hot because it's drawing air off, super hot air off the radiator. Well, it wasn't. It was just ambient air. So for sure we had no flow. So what I did is I popped this lower radiator hose off, and guess what I found? This guy. The plug, when you buy this radiator at the store, each end of the radiator will have a plug on it that pops onto the end. Well, they left it on there and just put the hose over it. So it was completely blocked. No coolant was able to get through the radiator. Now I've removed the plug and I'm going to fill it up and see what happens. So while I'm doing the cooling system repairs on this Dodge, I thought I'd show you guys how to properly fill up and bleed a cooling system. So if your cooling system has the cap on the radiator, you can't just fill it up, close it, and run it, or it's instantly going to overheat. The reason is all the coolant in there, you have to bleed the air out. The coolant will displace the air, but not until the coolant starts to circulate. The reason it doesn't cool properly is because air doesn't transfer heat nearly as effectively as coolant does. So what you end up with are a bunch of air pockets inside of the system, and then your temperature gauge will spike. It might drop back down, spike again. That kind of thing will be the symptoms of just having air in the system. So what you want to do is get a funnel kind of like this. That way you can see the coolant and the water in there. And then so I'll dump some more in. And then you just run the engine. You're just going to run it till it gets up to operating temperature. As it's running, you'll see all those air bubbles coming up, and that's the air bleeding out of the system, and it'll be displaced by the water and the coolant. So that's exactly what you're looking for. You're just going to run it to operating temperature until you see no more bubbles coming out, and cap it off, and you should be good. And then the reservoir will do the rest. When you fill up your reservoir, the coolant that's in this reservoir, it's not actually being circulated through the system while it's running. Whenever you shut this thing off, it's pressurized while it's running, so when you shut it off, as it cools down, it creates a vacuum and it'll suck any coolant out of the reservoir into the radiator if it needs to top it off. But doing it that way, it would take an extremely long time if you don't bleed it like this first. So that's pretty much all there is to it. Scamps Automotive, keep on rich.